I'm Rabbi Patrick, and welcome to Kehillah. Time for episode 2, The Big Picture. So, we're going to do our opening kavanot, our opening intentions, and what's going to ground us is Shehecheyanu, which I'm going to say in Hebrew, and then I'm going to translate into English. So here we go. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'hikianu lazman hazeh. So, a literal translation is who has given us life, and who has kept us sustained, and who has brought us to this place and time. So maybe I would translate it, blessed are you, our God, Spirit of the universe, who has given us life and sustained us and brought us to this magical place and time. So not a literal translation when I do it, but maybe one that has some kavanot to it, has some intentions, an intention of understanding how powerful it is that there is something instead of nothing, and that is grounded, that is sustained, and that we are brought to these amazing moments, these seasons, these eras, these epochs, and that we just get to be part of it, and that's an incredible thing. So I want to thank Lisa Plotkin from PJ Library. So Lisa and I were celebrating Tu B'Shvat, and she wanted me to do something around Shehecheyanu, and she said, that's my favorite prayer. And I asked her why, and she sort of told me why, and I thought, I think it might be good to make that episode number 2. So thank you, Lisa Plotkin from PJ Library. And if you're not familiar with PJ Library, you should check it out. Let's get Jewish books in the hands of Jewish families and Jewish kids. So a thing you need to understand about the rabbis is that they took metaphors and they made them physical. And sometimes they took physical things and they made them metaphors. Judaism, as we understand it today, is a reconstruction, it's a reform, it's a conservation of elements put together in new ways, such that we can have Jewish life without the temple, without the hereditary priesthood, the Levites, Kohanim, anywhere in the world. So it's a way of making what we might call Hebrew civilization possible throughout the world. So the rabbis, the mystics, the prophets, our sages, they took these different words and they took the metaphors and they made them into physical things, and the physical things they made into metaphorical things. It just depended on really human life, what our needs are. Religions throughout history have reformed themselves, have changed to meet human need. And that's what the rabbis did for us. And I think it's because they wanted to focus on the big picture. So I thought I would take a physical thing, just like the rabbis did, and I would make it into a metaphor. So I'm talking about the big picture, right? And I was talking about Shehecheyanu and gratitude and all of that stuff. But now I'm actually going to talk about a big picture. So you have never seen this before. It's a painting that was in my parents' house. And when my dad died, my mom moved up here. She didn't know what to do with this gigantic picture. She didn't have room for it. And this is a painting that I grew up with. I think my mom may have given it to my dad on his 50th birthday. I would have been around 8 years old, 7, 8 years old at the time. So I really have no idea. I just remember always having it. This is something that, it's just dad's painting. And it's this painting of a woman. I think she's like maybe a nurse, or maybe she's a caretaker of some kind. Maybe she's a nanny, an au pair. I don't really know. But she's sort of running with these little kids. It's like they're playing together. And that's my dad's painting. It's just a giant oil painting. And mom moves up here. She doesn't have room for it in her new place. So it sat behind me here in my little office that I share with the Rebbitzin. And, it just kind of stared at me for a while. And it was almost like it was taunting me. It was like, you better do something with me. Like, we got to make this happen, you and me. We got to figure out where this is going to go. Because you can't take something like that and stick it in the garage. That's not cool, right? There's a certain kind of reverence for something like that, you can't treat it that way. It's not quite to the level of like sacred literature or sacred objects like a Siddur, a prayer book, or a Torah scroll. It's not quite that level, but there's still something reverent about it, because it's not really about the painting. It's about the relationship that painting reminds us of. And you don't want to sully that relationship. You don't want to minimize it. Nevertheless, this big picture in this gigantic gold frame. I mean, I look around my house. My frames are all brought to you by Target and IKEA, right? This is pretty minimal stuff. And I'm cheap anyway, so that makes sense. But this oil painting, I mean, it has got this frame. This looks like something that if you go to an art museum, like highfalutin, like big stuff, right? Big, oil paintings from the Renaissance or something like that. It's one of those kinds of frames. Big, gold, gaudy looking thing. That's my dad's painting. It's literally the big picture. So keep that big picture in mind for a moment. So when we think about spirituality, when we think about religion, what we really need to be thinking about is a way of expressing gratitude. A way of expressing gratitude. So Shehecheyanu, it says gratitude for life, sustenance, and then something like place and time. So talking about life for a minute, well, that's a miracle. We don't even exactly know how to define life. When I was in middle school, the teacher told us that life is anything that consumes, reproduces, and makes waste. Well, that could also mean things that we don't think of as alive as well. All right. And we can't say that something that's alive is something that just comes from nature, because, we come from nature. So if we build a life like of some kind, like in a lab, like that's natural at that point, I guess. All right. So we don't even have a good term for it. It's kind of one of those things you just see something and you just know that it's animated in some way. It has spirit to it on some level. But it's amazing that there's that and that exists. That's life and sustenance, right? So we get to experience life as these beings that we are, and we get to experience our life, and we can make life, which is really incredible. And life doesn't always have to mean babies, right? Life can mean we bring things to life. We have ideas, we have imaginations. Sarah Amari Walker, who's this amazing physicist who's working on something called assembly theory, she talks about how one of the most amazing things in the universe is imagination, that we can create these parallel dimensions where we can do thought experiments, where we can play with things, where we can test ideas, where we can develop things, and then we can make those manifest in the world. Manifest, that would be more of a me way of talking, but you get the idea, right? It's just this miraculous thing. Life, and the fact that life is sustained even against the anarchy of entropy. Yes, things do decline, things die. You learn as a little kid, right? The toy breaks and maybe it can't be repaired. You go outside and you see a lizard or a baby bird and it's no longer alive. And you learn that actually we're part of a very sad system on some level. And yet there is still sustenance. There are still the 80-something-year-olds who go to synagogue and love to BS with everybody and cause trouble, right? And be in charge of everything, right? There's still that person that you see, riding their bicycle who can go faster than you, and maybe they're twice your age, right? You still have that. You still have these family restaurants that you go into where it's like Ma or Pops or grandpa or whatever, working, behind the counter, working the hostess stand, right? Walking around and chatting everybody up, right? We still have life. Even though there is the tragedy of death, there is still stuff. And even when a person passes away, what is left of them is memory and spirit. My dad is no longer with me, and yet he's with me. And I don't know how to explain that. There's this very famous line, Rabbi Alan S. Mahler, who said, "Love doesn't die, people do." And that's so true. I sense being of some kind of force, energy, connection to all of these people in my life who are no longer with me. I carry them as memories, and my body actually is what it is because of those experiences they've actually implanted in some ways on me. And I carry that with me everywhere I go. I sustain their life, even when they no longer have life. The next part of this, Lazman Hazeh, to be brought to, this particular place, this particular time. And you think all about history, right? I was watching this video. It was lessons from 100-year-olds. And they were being asked, what has changed the most? And I figured, listen, social change over 100 years, that's pretty darn big. But they talked a lot about technology and, the cell phones, the internet, all of these other things. It's amazing just on some level to think about all of the things that we have now. I mean, we have artificial intelligence. We literally have this way that storytelling can be done, without us. I remember when I was in high school, there was this girl who she really loved writing stories, but she kind of hated writing. And she would tell me these ideas she would have for like sci-fi stories and stuff like that. And she would say, I really just wish that I didn't have to sit down and write it. I wish I could just think of the premise, think of the characters, give something some notes, and then it just magically comes together. Well, that would have been sometime around the year 2000. Right? It's about 25 years ago. So in 25 years, we went from a high schooler who's thinking about, wouldn't it be great if we had a machine that would magically make stories, to having that. I mean, just sit with that for a minute. 25 years ago, a teenager who is into science fiction could say, I really wish there was a way that I could make sci-fi stories without writing and have a book just that exists. And now it does. That's just 25 years. Imagine those intervals times 4. And that's what you're getting out of these videos with these 100-year-olds. And they talked about, just having a positive attitude, being grateful that there's something instead of nothing. And I think about that all the time. Mathematically speaking, it is truly a miracle that there is something instead of nothing. None of this should exist. An asteroid should have taken this out a long time ago, but it didn't. If you think about how many things had to happen in order for this universe as it exists now to operate, it's like rolling sevens, trillions and trillions and trillions of time without stop and without any deviation. It's mathematical nonsense. It truly is what they call absolute zero. So absolute zero is probability, and it's a probability where a number gets so small that eventually you just say, it's zero. Right? It could happen, but it's so infinitesimally small that it must be not at all. And that's the odds that we would be here in this moment. I bet you there's plenty of times too where you've thought of this idea of how did I get here? How did I get sustained through all this? How did I survive this? Right? How did I deal with that divorce? How did I deal with losing that job? How could it be that I dealt with that family of origin? Right? How did I handle going from one city to another? How did I go from having one identity to another? And that's an incredible thing, that you have been sustained this whole time and that you have arrived at this particular moment. I saw a picture on Instagram, or a post, or whatever I'm supposed to call it. See, now I'm the old guy. And it was this picture of David Bowie. And it was David Bowie's face. And surrounding David Bowie's face was this text. And it said, just remember that the electrons lined up randomly in such a way that you could be alive to have experienced David Bowie. It's wild. But yeah, I mean, kind of think about that stuff every once in a while. Think about the fact that it is incredibly screwy that there's something instead of nothing, that you got to experience David Bowie or Beyonce or Doja Cat or Ani DeFranco or whatever you're into, right? That you got to experience some Super Bowl game that just blew your mind, that you got to experience falling in love, that you got to experience, learning more about yourself and about people around you, that your partner who you've been with for, 40, 50 years has become a new person every 7 years, right? So Esther Perel says, we will all be with lots of people, yet they may also be one person. Right. And that's what happens. Like every 7 years, you go from, well, now we're the couple living in the apartment and we don't have kids. And now we're the young parents who can barely survive. And, now we're the middle managers who, also are managing children, teenagers. We got to shoot those rockets off into the sky. Oh, now we're like relearning who we are. And it's like being kids again, and maybe we're not going to live in the family house anymore. Maybe we're going to go, have an adventure. Right. And every 7 years, you get to be someone else with someone else, and that's incredible, right? Even within something like monogamy, which I'm a huge advocate for, you can have this amazing, bountiful, unique, life-changing experience all the time. And that's the big picture. The big picture is that even in our worst moments, even in our moments of tragedy, even when things seem like we just have our backs up against the wall, there is a big picture. And sometimes the big picture feels sad, feels tragic, feels like, what's the point? Sometimes the big picture feels like something new is happening, right? Like you're looking at the face of your child, your grandchild, the person you're falling in love with, right? So those can be big pictures. A big picture can also be a gigantic picture sitting next to me, staring at me. And it's my dad through a painting saying, hey, where am I going to be? Where do I fit into this world that you've brought me into now that I'm no longer here? And so thinking about the big picture, I think about how I never intended to move to Richmond, Virginia. Never intended to then move to Midlothian either, but I did. And I got here and I did some stuff, and some of that stuff didn't work out, and then other things kind of worked out, and I tried different things, and eventually I got to here, and my dad died. And it was 2020, and it was May of 2020. And I had to take that risk. I put on 5 different masks or something and got down to Atlanta, and I got there just in time. And a few hours later, he was gone. And never thought that would be what would happen to me and my family. And then years later, here I am. My mom's living up here, and I've got to take care of her. And she never thought she would be in Virginia. She's an Atlanta girl. She's a Braves fan. Obviously, you wouldn't leave, but she did. And what came with her was him, my father, through this painting. And I had to figure out what to do with that. Well, it turns out, though, being in Virginia, it wasn't just about work and creating a new life. It was about becoming a dad. And, not knowing that I was going to become the dad of a black teenager from a rural area. And here we are. And, right now he's cleaning his room, getting ready for some stuff he's got to do. And on the wall in his bedroom is that painting that belonged to the grandfather that he never knew. And the big picture is something I try to talk with Javon about a lot, have an attitude of gratitude, focus on things that matter, live a good, decent life. And so I'm the dad, and I'm sharing my dad with him, someone he'll never get to know except through these things like the big picture on the wall. And that's what makes me say Shehecheyanu, these new moments where I get to share life, and I get to sustain life, and I get to bring it into these different places in time. And in that way, I get to live truly in God's image, since that is what God does for us. So thank you, everyone. I'm so excited about this Shavuot thing. Listen, a Mount Sinai mountain of ice cream. That is pretty cool. PJ Library, again, thank you so much. We're going to have tons of books out. I'll probably put some adult, Jewish books out too. So it's not all kid stuff, but we're going to have art. We're going to have pizza. We're going to have, of course, ice cream. Now, this ice cream mountain is part of a kind of performance art thing that Robin and I are going to do. There's going to be the Mount Sinai Mountain of Ice Cream. And as part of Shavuot, you read the 10 Commandments and you talk about what happened on Har Sinai, on Mount Sinai. And I'm going to do it with like Keebler elves and gummy bears and whipped cream and sprinkles. And it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be nuts. So I really hope to see you there again. It's at Art Factory. That's June 1st, 5:30. a chance to get some food in the kids' tummies. Yes, ice cream too. Do a fun activity, low key, and guess what? It's free. I'm going to say Shehecheyanu over that one. So please come. You must RSVP. We have to know how many people are coming. We need some sponsors for this thing. We really do. We want to do these free events. We want to be open and inclusive to everybody. We're really going to need your help. So go on our website, kehillahrva.org, and give a donation. Open your heart. If things like this podcast are meaningful to you, if you want to be part of Kehillah's big picture, that's definitely a way to do it. It's going to cost us probably $400 to do this event, and we'd really love it if, Jewish learning and Jewish life for kids south of the river is meaningful to you, and being able to bring your family to something that's open and inclusive is meaningful to you. We really need that help. So thank you again for listening to the podcast, and remember, you matter.